Hey guys, and welcome to this video, and this one's going to be something a little bit different, as this was an interview I did with DDK back at the ECS Season 7 finals. And kind of the topic of the interview is all about comparing Counter-Strike and Quake, particularly Quake Live, because that was the game that DDK was a prominent caster in, and he certainly has a great knowledge of both of the scenes, and perfect to pick his brain on these sorts of topics. Now, the reason it's coming out as audio like this instead of how I'd normally do it with transcribing the interviews is because transcribing, I think it's about 31 minutes or something, the audio on this one. It would have basically killed me. It would have been absolutely awful, and I like to edit them up a decent amount, and it would have just been a terrible experience. So instead I thought, we'll just chuck it into video and you guys can suffer through the bad audio quality. So the audio, when DDK's talking, is pretty decent. It's certainly good enough to hear what he's saying for the most part. The audio over on me, though, is shockingly terrible. The microphone wasn't facing me and all this sort of stuff. So I think I'm going to subtitle on at least the very important parts of all of the questions in case they're a little hard to hear in this sort of thing. So keep in mind that it was never a plan for the interview to come out as audio like it is now. It's always the plan for it to be transcribed. I think I even told DDK before the interview that I was going to transcribe it. So keep in mind, from both of our perspectives, we might be acting a little bit differently. Certainly, DDK probably felt like he could take longer to think about answers to questions, whereas if you're doing it on camera or the audio, you might just run with it to not have as long as a gap. And certainly from my perspective, I say yes quite a lot. Bad mannerism, and I certainly wouldn't be doing it if I'd known it was going to come out as audio like this. Anyway, let's get into this one. So I was wondering, could you just kind of quite briefly summarise your time broadcasting Quake? How did you get into it, co-cast, this sort of thing, your time as a Quake caster?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because back then, there wasn't this saturated market as it is now for commentary jobs and so on. And I sort of just took an opportunity because I was making content at the time, and there wasn't a future in esports yet. And that was just at the beginning, really, of, I suppose, the Twitch revolution and actually having a broadcast infrastructure that was created that all of esports could then sit on and grow from.
Yeah.
So there was it was just purely just a passion-based thing. And I just dropped out of university as well because I was doing law, and I was like, this doesn't really fit me. And I was kind of working out where I should be in life. And what I didn't realize, because at that point still, pro gaming and everything around what I was doing was sort of like a pipe dream. So I never really, even though I was making very limited money from it and doing it as a job, I never really saw a long-term future in it. But I was doing it because I loved it, and because it was I was just very obsessed by continuing to kind of talk about games. And so it was a cool kind of safe space as well to develop, because face it, they started with Quake Live and these Sunday Cups, and it was all about guinea pigging the platform effectively. Like, it's a small game. The founders are from this game. One of the founders, Sturmy. Some people may not know who he is, but he's sort of the fatality of Italy. He's like one of the most prolific FPS or arcade FPS players ever. And he's one of the founders of the company, and I knew him pretty well. And so yeah, they wanted to start with Quake. It was really easy. I'd have like random guests every weekend, and sometimes I'd have a guest that wouldn't even really be able to speak English. Like most notably, one time I had one of my guests was a guy who was at the time very famous across different games. Everyone knew who Kula was. And he couldn't really speak very good English, so I was just like casting with him for like 6 hours, and he just makes like noises, just grunting, and it's very weird. So I had a lot of weird challenges as a commentator very early on, and I didn't really have many templates to follow, so I had to sort of figure it out. But yeah, it was very fun. But I think at the same time, I always had this format in the back of my head. I know Quake Live is not going to suddenly grow into this expansive thing. Okay, so I got to think about where the future is. And so I had a lot of various crises of confidence in that path, but I stuck with it through the hard times and managed to eventually switch over to CS. So
Yeah, so comparing Counter-Strike Go and Quake Live, we'll go first from kind of the spectator angle. Are there any aspects from Quake Live or previous versions of Quake that you think aren't as prevalent in Counter-Strike? Perhaps are there certain aspects of Quake that really made you attracted to casting it, watching it, this sort of thing? Yeah.
So it's an interesting one because I played Quake for the first time in like 1999, the Quake 3 test, and that's when I sort of fell in love with it. And I just played, the UT demo as well, and I fell in love with that as well. But Quake kind of edged it for me. And I also played Half-Life and Counter-Strike in the very early phases around the same time. So I was kind of exposed to all of it at once, and I loved all of it. But for some reason, there was something for me about the 1v1 format and the team deathmatch format in Quake that just kind of captured me a little bit more. And for whatever reason, I don't know what it was per se. I think if I was around different people, that could have changed. But I think because I was sort of just playing with myself mostly, I think I just got obsessed initially by this idea of getting very, very good at Quake 3, because there was this the first thing I ever had accessibility to really, as far as like playing on a consistent basis, was Quake 3 test, and I would play DM17. Because there was what was it? It was like 4 maps or something you could play. There was Q322. There was Q3DM17, which is campground. Not campground. Sorry, longest yard. There was DM7, which is like the Temple of Retribution. I forget what the name is. And then there was like 2 other maps or something. And so that was it. And so what people would do is they play the space map, and you would have this. You join a public server, and whoever wins gets to stay. It's like King of the Hill. And I wanted to be that guy that was always there, instead of being the person punished and have to like wait 40 minutes to then play again. And so that journey, I just became really obsessed by it. And I think there's something, contrasting it to CS. One of the things that's really awesome is that it's just very, like a burst of very, very focused, like a 10-minute, like 1 versus 1. It's just super focused. Everything goes in. There's no breaks. There's no pauses. And it's all about, a measure of wits and individual ability and outsmarting your opponent. It's just very concentrated, the experience. And I think that when I was younger, I was really captured by that. And as far as spectating the differences there, I think that's what captures people too, is that it's very intuitive. There's just the score, just explaining it to someone compared to like explaining Overwatch to someone is obviously it's way much simpler. I mean that's what Counter-Strike has going for it these days, is that so many people I've either introduced to Counter-Strike who have no esports background, or gamers who come into esports, and they always look at Counter-Strike and they're like, okay, I can kind of get this, like, because it gives you something as a new player. Like, even if you have no concept of anything in an FPS game, you never played an FPS game before, it gives you something insofar as you shoot a guy and you can see that, someone had to, like, you see a crosshair, you see someone did that, you can see the skill there, you can see that person killed 2 people, and that is inherently just an idea that makes sense, just intuitively impressive. And unfortunately, a lot of the other esports aren't intuitively impressive, and something that Quake always had was that it was also very intuitive, and even more so than Counter-Strike in that the maps are smaller and there's less things to have to like memorize, and it's not all the spots, unlike CS, aren't as important. Like, you don't have to know all the angles as much. So Quake always had that going for it. So as far as a contrast to CS, it's really just that CS has so many more variables, and the pacing of CS is very, very different. And I think that's why CS also excels in an esports format. But I think that's also the problem, in that we don't currently have anything filling the void of what Quake left, because Quake it's very intuitive like CS as we just covered, but what is missing is that super intuitive, something that can be very exciting because the skill ceiling is so high, so you can have individual flares, so you can follow a personality. That's something that fighting games does really well, that is you can connect to one person because of the character they play and because of the personality is so obvious. And that's something that we have challenges with in Counter-Strike sometimes, because a team of 5 people, and that team, like, can you be a fan of the players or the brand? Well, the players might represent a bunch of different brands, and are you a fan of a lineup? Well, they don't stick around for very long. Like, we have issues with building up that support behind personalities. But I feel like Quake did that very well. It's very easy to do that in Quake. and we don't have that kind of. It's like what's a good sport comparison? I used to say tennis, but I don't know if that's really a good sport comparison as far as sports are concerned. But there's something about Quake which is just so easily accessible that it's currently, I think, missing. I think something will take its place at some point. It's because it's just a working formula. So comparing the two are very different. I would say as a commentator, CS is much better because the pacing, there's a lot more that is available to you because of the natural pacing to the game. There's always time, depending on the game, there's time to be really intense, the way that a round can build up. It can be a slow build of tension, or it can be very explosive. There can be time to go over analysis, or time to have a witty battle between you and your co-commentator, or to throw a joke in there. There's time to explain some of the more basic concepts. And you can mesh all these things together while still following and building storylines for the game from a macro sense, as well as focusing on the things that are happening at a micro level as well, which are exciting. Yeah. And so it just peppers in all the right things at the right times. And I think it's also with all of the variables in the game too. That's something that it has going for it that Quake doesn't have. And that allows you to have the replayability that hooks people when they play Dota, for example. Because every time you see it, you're going to see different stuff. Same map, still 5 versus 5, still the same guns, but it's just so many different spots because of the way the meta is and so on. So that's where Quake has its failings in 1 versus 1. Is that Quake is very, very, very exciting when you get the cream of the crop playing. And it's just every millimeter, then it becomes exciting, like gained or lost between the players. But the problem is that if you're slightly worse than the other player, because there's no real random elements in Quake, suddenly you have this problem where it's going to be very dominant, and you kind of know who's going to win after the first few minutes, and that can be sometimes tiring. So I think that's the problem that Quake had to deal with. So it's I don't know if I really answered the question, but I kind of just went off on the next question. Yeah, I'll answer the next question. Okay.
So let's. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to name some pros from Quake.
Yeah.
And what I want you to do is pick either a team or a player in Counter-Strike that you think kind of their attributes perhaps are very similar. They reflect each other.
Yeah.
And can you also kind of explain a little bit about the Quake players, because probably the people who follow my content, Counter people, they probably won't know the Quake players as well.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So anyway, let's start with Cypher.
Okay, so Cypher is an interesting one because he's one of those players where when he's on, he can't be beaten. He basically can't be beaten. And it's really interesting because he's not the most cerebral player, you could say. He's not known for his smarts, although of course he is very game smart. But there's something about some quality to he's almost clairvoyant, and when he hits the zone, he hits this level of a flow state which is beyond what anybody else can achieve. And when he hits that level to his flow state, he has this unparalleled game sense on top of this ability mechanically that is unsurpassed. And it's like you'll take more damage from him. Like you can't predict how the fights are going to go, because usually in Quake, the way that engagements work is you only really want to commit fully to an engagement if you know you're going to win that, but not just that. You also have to know that with the way that the items are going to be and the way that their spawn might be, that you're going to be left in a position where you'll be able to recover, because you need some recovery time, generally speaking, or time to get into position for whatever else you're doing. So there's a lot of things that go into that equation, and one of them is I need to know how much damage I'm going to take from this exchange, and pretty much you can reliably guess that. And it's like one of those weird things where as a pro player you just know, and against Cypher he always will do more damage than you can possibly predict, and so it always just throws you off. He's very jarring to play against, and so I think Simple might be the best comparison, because the other thing about Simple is that Simple can hit that same kind of flow state, and what happens is when they hit that flow state, like anybody, that's you operating at like your peak performance, like the best possible performance that you're capable of as a human being in that moment. And so then what happens is the equations kind of change as to like the kinds of things that you can do and the plays you can make. And because Cypher, like Simple, they're not bogged down by being too intellectual as players, so they can freely express themselves in the game more emotionally, which means that they'll do things which are unintuitive and don't make sense, except if you're in that flow state, which you can't plan for. That's just something that just happened. Yeah. So Simple and Cypher, I think that's the best comparison. I think it seemed like you expected that one.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I might get the next one as well. Who in Counter-Strike, or what team or player in Counter-Strike is Rafa?
Okay, yeah, okay. So I knew Rafa was going to be coming up. So Rafa is awesome. I did a podcast with him not too long ago. Rafa's one of the reasons why he's so incredible is I would describe him as maybe one of the best competitors that's ever existed in professional video games. There's this quality to Rafa whereby he's got this level of mental constitution, mental fortitude, where there's no situation there's no level of pressure. There's no stage that's too big for Rafa to not be enhanced by that pressure. And the interesting thing is that he's also human as well. Like after like a really intense game, you're going to see like him screaming, like he's going to release that emotion. But during the match, it's razor focus. And one of the things that's very different about Quake, which is worth mentioning, is because it's like, especially in the 1v1 format, the level of pressure you experience is not comparable to a team format. When you're playing with a team, you have a shared burden. You have it's like how people respond differently when it's like mob mentality. People become a little bit more stupid and they become a bit more suggestible and they kind of are more emotional. Yeah. It's very much the same in the effect it has on you when if you make a mistake and there's a moment to dwell on it in the match, you're the only person that is there to fix that mistake. You're the only person that's there to figure out a new strategy. If you're not understanding like what's not working right now, you have to figure that out, and no one else is going to do that for you. And everyone's watching you, and so all the pressure's on. It's very difficult. It's a very different feeling and very hard to get used to. Rafa has absolutely conquered that. He's also extremely intelligent in how he plays the game, and he evolves. He's got this evolutionary capability. It's really bizarre. Like I've seen Rafa come up against opponents. Like, for example, I think notably there was a period when there was this new Russian player called Evil who'd come onto the scene, who had played this style of like a mixture of rushdown, but a very tactical style with incredible mechanics. And he was this stylistic difference was very difficult for people to deal with because he would make these moves that were unpredictable. He would deal more damage than anybody else, and he would get in your face. And the only way to understand how to defeat him was to play specifically him, because no one else played like him. And so each time Rafa played against him during the tournaments and otherwise, and given that because of the region differences, he couldn't practice against him online, it was just at events basically, you would see how he would adapt over time, and he was very effective at this. He has like these amazing decision-making trees which he creates, and he builds on and builds on and reiterates. And then as he plays new people, he understands how, again, like he builds it into his expert intuition. And again, like it's got to be considered that when you have a smart player, it's more than just being someone that can sit down and watch a demo and figure out what's going on. It's about understanding what's going on. It's about creating a system, and it's about building that into your intuition, which is a spot where you're playing the game and you don't have time to think. It's just a response. It's seeing something and knowing the answer without any work being done. You've done the work already. So Rafa was able to do this in very short spaces of time, figure out the answers to be able to, within a tournament, beat someone and face something that's very difficult for him, and then you just overcome it. And so I've never quite seen that kind of a quality from anyone in a 1v1 sport before in esports. And also he has very good mechanics. It's nothing to shout about, but it's enough that even though we just mentioned Cypher, I would say Rafa is still the best jeweler of Quake Live, because he's so smart and his application to his smarts is incredible. He's the full package, actually. Apart from, obviously he doesn't quite have the mechanics of a Cypher, but he's otherwise the full package. So it's very sad that he doesn't have a platform to really play because I feel like he should be a rock star. That guy should be a rock star, but he's unfortunately not really in that position. I'm not sure what he's doing right now, apart from playing Quake intermittently.
He did a bit of Overwatch, didn't he? Yeah.
He did Overwatch. I don't know if he dabbled with Apex much. He's played some Quake champions. He's very good, of course. Like he's one of the best. But other than that, he doesn't have the stage he deserves, I think.
Yeah.
So
who is Rafa?
Oh, right, yeah. I just all right, who is he? Okay, so that's really interesting. This is a much harder one. So I think obviously as far as a team goes, I'd have to give him some a team like Astralis because of the level of it's a mixture of the innovation, but also how methodical he is, and also how professional he is. Because that's another thing. Like all those characteristics are parallel to Astralis. As far as a player goes, I think I might go to Zipex.
Yeah.
So you're
I think I would have said Device. I actually don't think Device is the most. I think he's almost extremely skilled.
Yes.
But I think his decision making is unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why probably that's probably why.
I think Device is a good shout too as well. I think specifically because of the types of preparation that Device uniquely has to do, being an AWPer, and how he studies his opposition and how he iterates his decision making through that. I think that's a really good shout, Device. And Zipex is partially due to the fact that his decision making is pretty consistently in more dynamic spots. Just super. He's always playing the plus EV positions, which is something that Rafa was conditioned to from being mentored by another player called 04, and a lot of poker influences, was conditioned heavily in his development to look for plus EV, plus expected value spots. So and that's why I think of Zipex as well.
Okay, let's go with Avec.
So Avic's an interesting one. Avic's he's an emotional player, but he's very talented, a very aggressive player as well. Who would Avic be? I think in his prime, for me, I would probably pick someone like Fur. I could also see someone like, if you go, maybe in the earlier periods as well, someone like Snacks even as well, because Avic also has this like sneaky capability to his aggression. He does it in an intelligent way. It's not just like this pure kind of rush down type, I'm going to abuse my good mechanics, but at the same time he does have that emotional component to his play, which I think is why I like Fur for him quite a bit as well, because Fur he's sneaky, he's aggressive, he can get under your skin and do these unexpected things, and even though you know how he plays, he's still going to surprise you. You still can't solve him. So I'd probably choose Fur. Who did you have in mind? It's a hard one, actually.
I think perhaps Early Days Simple.
Early Days Simple, okay.
The first, his flip side, that sort of period, because he had a period of mindless aggression, which is kind of, to an extent, why I associate with that. Perfect parallel, but yeah. Anyway, let's go for Cooler.
Oh yeah, so Cooler's a really interesting one. So Cooler is, when Cooler was 15 years old, and we already talked about the pressure, like how pressure is different in 1v1 games. It's completely different. It's very, very taxing, especially if you're young. And Cooler's breakout performance was in 2003 at an ESWC, and it was against 04, who was at the time head and shoulders pretty much above everybody else in 1v1 in Quake 3. 04 had his era for I think it was from the end of I think most of 2001, it was after Fatality, most of 2001, all of 2002, and the first half of 2003, and then Cooler happened.
Yeah.
And 04 was this older player, very experienced, the best North American player at the time, and Cooler beat him in a best of 5 in his first big event ever when he was 15 years old. And to do that, again, one of the things about Quake is that you don't get time to fix stuff.
Yeah.
When you're at the tournament, you're playing the match. You either you win or you lose, and that's it. And so you have to have the ability to be smart whilst and kind of figure stuff out whilst you're trying to play intuitively. It's really difficult. It's a very difficult balance to strike. And Cooler's able to do this, and he had this very tactical style where when people typically are in control, let's say in Quake, you feel like, okay, I'm in control, therefore I have the advantage. I should be converting with getting kills, and I should be building a lead.
Yeah.
And that idea is also predicated upon the idea that eventually you're going to lose control and you're going to concede some kills, because that's kind of how it goes. But Cooler was this player as well that on a lot of maps, he's very happy to just sit on a one frag lead.
Yeah.
Or sometimes he's even happy just to sit on a tie and just outlast you and play the war of attrition. And this is like a style of play which is very like anxiety inducing, because it can be taken away from you in just one mistake. But he was always so confident that he would not lose his control of the map and that he would be able to outsmart you, that he would never expose himself on certain maps. And so he's very, very smart. Actually, Rafa famously studied Kula because he felt like Kula was like the smartest player in the 1-2 study. So Kula, I'm looking for a player that's very smart, that was born to compete and has nerves of steel, a meme generator as well, because Kula obviously is a meme generator. This is a difficult one.
This was hard.
Yeah. Actually, I just had another good thought for Avek, actually. Could be like Pasha in his prime. Could have been a good one as well, because Pasha's also just kind of a crazy player. Oh god, it's so difficult. I've actually thought about this a few times, and I've always struggled because Kula is so special. Who would be Kula? The top level, because I feel like he's probably got to be one of those. It's got to be a player that's from Eastern Europe or something, because Kula is just very quirky and a bit of an oddball, and it's partially due to cultural differences. I would imagine. So I don't know. I'm blanking on this one. I don't know. Did you have a good one for this?
So in some senses, like just in the sense he's like ice cold, I think Twist on Team Liquid. Okay, I always think he's just completely ice cold. He's totally emotionless most of the time.
Yeah.
So maybe Rakula was one that, in terms of overall package, I couldn't think of anyone actually.
It's really difficult. Kula's a difficult one. I would love it if anyone has any good ideas to say send tweets.
So are there any other players that really, when I first mentioned the question, any kind of other parallels that quickly came to your mind that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, so I guess there's some always some basic ones. I haven't thought of an answer, but someone like Toxic. Who in Quake 3, he was Quake 3 and Quake 4. Well, Quake 4, Toxic was the most dominant 1v1 player in that game. He won like 9 tournaments without anyone really being able to like touch him. And he's known as like the Terminator, like stone cold. He actually chewed gum, much like Twisted. And that was actually, he did it because there are studies that suggests that it increases your level of focus. It's like a thing that motorcyclists do, I think, to increase their focus and reaction speeds. I don't know if Twist picked it up because of that reason. I actually heard, I think I actually asked him about this. I think Twist does it because he talked too much or something. Okay. So it was to get him to talk less. I think that was the idea, which is, when I heard that, I was like, that sounds a bit strange. But Toxic, he is considered to be the guy that has the best aim of Quake, period, of all time. Granted, obviously, Cypher's, put the asterisk on Cypher there, because Cypher's peaks of nuts, but consistently, Toxic's aim is ridiculous. So, who has the most ridiculous aim consistently in CS? Who's the best aimer in CS? Because I'm trying to think, and do we just give everything to simple?
I usually say Scream, but I don't think that's actually a good answer. Scream's very.
Scream is strengths.
Quite one-dimensional.
Scream is strengths.
So I don't. More set Forest maybe. Forest is very fluid.
Forest could be a good one. Yeah. I'm going to go Scream and Strengths. So that's definitely a pairing that works. Because Strengths is like all about the aim. And it's his failing as well. So I've come up with this one. I don't know if I have a great answer for it, but basically I don't know if anybody's really considered the best aimer in CS, because CS is it's kind of complicated in that sense.
There's many different styles and stuff.
There's a lot of different stuff that works, but as far as amazing mechanics are concerned, right now, Rez is considered to have the best mechanics in Sweden. Mechanically, obviously, Simple is not good, but the thing is that Toxic himself, his mechanics aren't super ridiculous. But when he's aiming at someone, it looks absolutely ridiculous. So it's one of those weird ones. That's why I actually started to think Simple, because that's kind of simple. Like from the offset, you're like, okay, your crosshair placement all over the place, but his mechanics, like when he's actually having the fight, pretty sick. So
Nico, perhaps.
Oh yeah, Nico. Yeah, that's actually yes, you've nailed it. Why didn't I think of Nico? Why didn't I think of Nico? Absolutely, it's Nico. Yeah.
All right, Nico. Final question. So for me, Counter-Strike's kind of always been my game. It's been the game that I know to a very deep level. But Quake, when I was watching Quake, they were not necessarily a better game to watch, but there were certainly aspects to Quake that made it, in some senses, like exciting in its own right. Like I'd always watch it alongside CS, this sort of thing. So is it a shame that right now we don't have an arena FPS out there? Are we missing out?
I think so. I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that, especially these days, we have all these new eyeballs of people that are really interested in esports.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like, you're missing an ice cream flavor or something like that. Ice cream's amazing. You go to the shop for some ice cream, and some people are going to be a bit disappointed because that flavor is not there. And some people will be disappointed, won't know what they're missing just yet, because it fills a great spot, because we have these MOBAs, we have an RTS game, although I guess it would be nice if StarCraft was a bit bigger, but I don't know what will happen with the RTS, the pure RTS genre moving forwards. I miss Brood War a lot personally.
Yeah.
But the fighting games is healthy. You got loads of stuff for fighting games. But when it comes to FPS, as far as like PC FPS, you've got your team-based FPS, but we are missing the 1v1, and it offers a completely different time slot. You can cram the games into like much smaller portions of time. For one map in Counter-Strike, you can play an entire best of 3 with overtimes in Quake. And so that gives, as far as formats are concerned, there's so many different broadcast formats you could do, which would be really engaging. And also would fit really well into some of these like tournaments like DreamHacks and so on. We have all these multiple games and streams going on. Like, as far as general consuming of esports content, it's great. It's also super easy for people to follow, because you can basically, if you're a fan of Cooler and Rafa, you can just go and tune into their games. It's low investment, high return for people who just want to follow some really competitive games. And also you can get some really exciting stuff that's just like, again, like it's just way more condensed. So I think that is definitely missing. It's definitely missing. And I feel like it has to reappear at some point. I feel like the only reason why it hasn't reappeared is because right now, obviously people are investing in esports, but the issue is that because people still don't know how to correctly monetize esports, the only way to really monetize things and make a project justifiable is to create you kind of have to create your own games market in a sense. And so you have to create a game like Blizzard did with Overwatch. You have to create a huge following and fan base, but to do that you have to appeal to the casual players, which is the antithesis of what you're really going for when you want to make a really good hardcore competitive game. So you're kind of trying to do something, you're trying to have like this dual identity which is fighting against itself. So I think that's the reason why we're not seeing it. I think that it's inevitable it will come back. I think we just need it to be more established that the markets already exist and that you can monetize a really, really competitive esports game that's just good. You do need people to play it, but I feel like people are becoming more FPS literate, generally speaking. I think stuff like Fortnite's been amazing for FPS literacy, so it's going to come back eventually. I just don't know when.
Anyway, guys, that is everything for this video. Thanks again to Dan for the interview, and I hope you guys enjoyed the answers. Certainly, I enjoyed not transcribing this one, but it's that way. Anyways, if you found that to your liking, why didn't you hit that like button? Get subscribed, follow me on Twitter. Certainly, if you want to see my other interviews, Twitter's the best place to find them. And thanks to everyone for watching. If you want to see my normal content, which tends to be more analysis focused, why don't you click around on me? Of course, hit that sub button. You'll be able to see it in good time. Anyway, guys, thanks to all of you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.